Good to see you all virtually again for one of our live Q&As. And most of you will know the format, and this is an opportunity for you to give you an update on recent developments within the university and in the sector. But also, more importantly, this is an opportunity to answer your questions. And we have always been trying to answer as many questions as possible, but also if we can't answer the question, we will, as before, try and answer them in the SharePoint after the event. Welcome also to those of you watching this recorded version later. Unfortunately, you may not be able to engage with live questions, but nevertheless, if you have any questions after watching the event, please don't hesitate to send email to relevant member of the exec board or myself on any aspect of this discussion. And most of you know, again, the format. When the questions appear on the questions box, make sure you highlight the ones that you want us to respond first. So Kerry will try and prioritize those questions first. So just to start off, a few comments from me. It's nice to be on campus and see more activity. It's good that some of the restrictions have been lifted. We are not fully normal yet, but we are moving towards some kind of normality. And I've been on campus every week, and it's good to see every week I see more students and staff, and some of you I've met physically, which was nice to see in the last few weeks. But at the same time, we have to follow advice and make sure that we have some social restrictions until we know what the next stage of the government's roadmap is on the 21st of June. But as I said, we're making a lot of preparations for not supporting students who are on campus, and you would have seen the emails. A lot of prep work has been done by academic and professional staff, obviously in terms of assessment and examination, but also in terms of looking after the students during the summer programs, because I think, as we all know, there have been significant impact on our students during this year, and a lot of them want to come back and meet staff and students and have some kind of university experience. So I'm very grateful for everybody putting a lot of events on show for our students once they've completed the exams. And in that context, after I finish, Graham Wynne, our Pro Vice Chancellor for Education, will give you an update on some of the work that has been done by him and the Deans of Education and various colleagues in the schools to prepare for the next academic year and what preparations have been taken already. In terms of sector, obviously, there's a lot going on. You may have seen that in the national media, but I think the key thing I would highlight for you today is that a couple of weeks ago, the government published the Skills and Post-16 Education Bill. And this is the government's thinking on what the future education provision, particularly in the further education and higher education, might look like and what policy changes they may introduce. It's still some way to go in terms of being agreed by the Parliament, but nevertheless, they have set out their thoughts in that bill. And there are a number of things. I won't have time to go through it in detail, but I think there are three things that I want to pick out that might be of interest to colleagues. The first thing that they have highlighted is that they would like to see how the further education and higher education establishments help with the levelling up agenda. They want further education colleges and universities to play a big role in providing the skills needs of their local communities. And in fact, in the bill, there is provision for taking regulatory action on FE colleges or HE institutions who are not quite delivering the levelling up agenda. So it's something that we need to take note of. And in that context, I just want to highlight one thing that we have done recently, which might speak to that agenda. So the Department of Education recently invited bids for Institute of Technology. And these are opportunities for universities to work with FE colleges and other partners in an industry to see how we can meet some of the skills needs of post-16 and universities. And we put in a bid, and it is very competitive, and we were leading the bid, and I'm very grateful to Sarah Davis, the Pro Vice Chancellor for Science and Engineering, with Nigel Bannister from the School of Physics, who led the bid, and we had partnership with De Montfort University, Leicester College, and other industrial partners. And I'm pleased to tell you that we were successful in being invited to the next stage of this competition. We are very prestigious competition, £13 million if we are successful. That will allow us to deliver exactly what this is in the bill, to level up the agenda for the local community, work in partnership with FE colleges and industry to meet some of the digital skills needs and the needs in this region. So I'm very excited, and I was at the Department of Education's feedback session, and they were very, very complimentary about our bid, and I hope They will give the same complimentary feedback in stage 2, and we will be successful. We'll update you. But I just want to reassure you, we're already thinking about some of the things that I mentioned in that bill. The second aspect in the bill that might be of interest is about tuition fees and what might be happening in terms of higher education funding. And then also there is something for Office for Students in terms of student outcomes, how they want to ensure the Office of Students is delivering good student outcomes and how they can guarantee the universities are delivering good outcomes for students. So those are some of the things that are in the bill that we need to be cognizant of, but I can reassure colleagues that we are aware of it, and some of it we're already doing, but we'll watch with interest what comes out and then respond appropriately. And I also want to mention that there has been a lot of activity around USS, and I'm very grateful for colleagues who have completed the survey. We had a very high response rate, about 48–50% of our staff responded to the survey. And clearly there is a lot more that will happen between now and when the trustees and JNCC agree the final outcomes. But nevertheless, I think there is no question in the higher employers' response, this is unaffordable. There are significant challenges for staff and institutions to meet some of the conditions that are being imposed by the trustees. So we will engage, but I'm attending meetings at the Vice Chancellor's level with the employers, and Martin, for example, is doing the same with finance directors. We are engaging and we will keep you updated. And as you know, there is a SharePoint with all the information that you can get updates on what's happening on USS, and we'll do everything we can to make sure your views are represented in the discussion. So very grateful for the responses, and they have been included in the submission we made recently. And colleagues might have also seen in the news, there are some various things being mentioned about student recruitment for September. Some universities held back on making a lot of offers this year because they had a lot of students either deferring for admissions this year because of the large number of students meeting the requirement, or students themselves deferring because of the pandemic. So as a result, there is a lot of concern among the students and universities. How do we deal with a large number of students who might want to come into universities where there might be physical capacity issues where we may not be able to take many? And it is not a great situation to be in if you're a student, for example, think you're going into university. And I've read really sad case studies of some students with top grades not getting offers from any university because the universities didn't want to take a risk of accommodating these students and not being able to deliver on their promise. But I will, once I finish, once Graham gives you an update, Kerry will give you an update on the student recruitment and how we are preparing to welcome students in September and the measures we have put in place, because they have had significant disruption to the education. And again, we need to do the best we can. And the third thing that I want to briefly mention is clearly we have now announced the outcome of the phase 1 consultation on the changes. And every job loss is regrettable, but we're doing everything we can to support the staff. And I think it is something that we are taking very seriously. And I think, as you colleagues will know, there is a UCU boycott of the university, and I'm very disappointed. Clearly, we will do everything we can to minimize the disruption to our activity. Some external examiners have resigned. That is disappointing, but I can assure you, talking to Graham and the heads of school, we are doing everything we can to support our students graduate on time or progress to the next stage. I'm also aware of 1 or 2 events that have been cancelled as a result of the boycott. And again, I've been engaging with the relevant heads of school to see what actions or what support they need. And we will monitor this. And I just want to reassure staff that we have 3,500 staff in this university, and I will do everything I can with the exec board to keep the operation activities going. And on that note, I want to share with you some of the good news that have happened, as well as not so good news with the boycott Leicester, but there have been lots of good news as well. So for example, Julie Morrissey got a 500,000 equipment grant from BBSRC Research Funding Council. One of our teaching fellows in archaeology got a prestigious Leverhulme Early Career Fellowship. And then we had Kamalesh got a 2.1 million global research grant. And then we had John Schwabe in the Leicester Institute for Structural and Chemical Biology getting a 2.5 million Welcome Investigator Award. So I just want to reassure colleagues, clearly there is a lot being said about Leicester, some of it not very nice, but I also want to reassure colleagues that there is some good work going on in the university. And I'm also aware in Science and Engineering recently, we had numerous papers published in Nature, which is one of the prestigious journals in that discipline. So it's really good to see that good work is being done by our academic colleagues during this time. It has been a very difficult time. We will try and continue to support everybody as much as we can. And I'm under no illusion, it is a challenging time for everybody. And I'm very grateful for everybody doing the best we can to support our staff and students. And I'm sure you would have seen that the sector as a whole is facing some challenges. And we will do the best we can to put the University of Leicester in the best possible position. And that's what I will try to do as your Vice Chancellor. I'm going to stop there now, and I'm going to hand over to Graham to give you an update on how we are preparing for the start of next academic year.
Thank you, Nishan. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm just going to update you all on our education planning for next academic year, as Nishan said. So as you might imagine, we're planning for a number of scenarios for next academic year. We've got 3 scenarios that we're planning for. And scenario 2, our middle case, is the default planning scenario. So I'll tell you about that one first. We also have a more optimistic and a more pessimistic scenario. So scenario 2 is our middle case. This is the default planning. And what we're looking at here is a situation where positive cases in the UK of COVID-19 are unstable, possibly variable, and probably variable by region. And there's a resumption of some restrictions and quite a bit of uncertainty. So under this scenario, we'll probably have a delayed or phased return of students to campus to prevent the mass movement of students. We'd be looking at the delivery of in-person teaching with appropriate mitigation and restrictions, such as we've become used to with face coverings, hygiene, ventilation requirements, small group teaching, this sort of thing in place. And it will be blended learning, of course, in operation with ready to move online at short notice. We also have a more optimistic scenario, scenario 1. This is the case where the national vaccination programme will be on target for all scenarios, and positive cases nationally will be at low levels. If that's the case, we hope to have a return to a more normal pre-COVID style of teaching with fewer restrictions. Under this method, under this scenario, we will still continue to operate blended learning. We do not want to give up on blended learning. We want to utilise all of the materials we've developed this year, and I'll come back to that later. And that'll still be a mix of in-person and online teaching across our courses. And there may be scope for large group teaching, depending on the exact details of the scenario. That was the more optimistic case. The less optimistic and worst case scenario, scenario 3, was where there's a next wave developing, or there are active restrictions nationally and possible additional lockdown. And of course, under this scenario, our teaching will be predominantly online across all courses, with possible exemptions where for some courses where government guidance allows. So in this case, there would clearly be restrictions on student travel to prevent mass movement of students. So we've got the middle case, which is our default planning scenario, where we've got blended learning with a core of in-person teaching for each course, with all of the safety restrictions we've become used to. So by default then, what our schools are planning for is for the balance of teaching to shift more towards in-person delivery for 21-22 compared to what we've been able to deliver in 2021. We've been evaluating this year's education throughout the year, and what we want to do is retain blended learning, but retain the most positive aspects of it while providing more in-person teaching and more social activities for students, of course. So our evaluation of Ignite this year, our blended learning provision, has taken place in 3 phases. The final phase will conclude this month, May, and students are going to have the opportunity to fill out a student learning experience survey to tell us in detail about how they found their learning experience this year, all of the challenges as well as any positives they can find from the situation. Phase 1 of the evaluation took place mid-term 1 and led to the publication of an updated dual delivery guidance for semester 2, which focused on clarity of information for students, how to effectively blend weekly synchronous and asynchronous events, and helping students to prioritise their time. Phase 2 of the evaluation came at the end of term 1. in December 2020, and it looked at feedback from students and staff around the shift to blended learning, identifying key challenges and any key positives. So from that, there was a couple of messages that came through loud and clear, and the social isolation was a big negative for students, and we've heard a lot about that through the year. But one of the clear messages for education planning that came through was structure, consistency and clarity of provision were some of the key elements that students appreciated. In particular, modules and programs that offered this structure, clear structure and consistency throughout really showed good student success, good student progress and better levels of student well-being. So in the planning principles that we're finalising, what we want is to aim for consistency in terms of the release and availability of teaching materials, student workload, assessment timetabling and signposting within our blended learning platforms. So we're looking for consistency across and between modules at programme level, and in particular the way that modules are presented on Blackboard so that students don't have to fight to find the information that they need to be engaging with each week. So that's going to be a big aim for next year. Now, a couple of key points I'd like to highlight in amongst all of this education planning is as I said, we're aiming for a balanced blend of in-person and online events, synchronous and asynchronous, and very conscious of the amount of work that's gone into this year in preparing for our blended learning. And what we want to do is retain a lot of that work. So a lot of high quality material is being produced this year and recorded, and we want to reuse a decent amount of that material. So we shouldn't be thinking about re-recording or generating everything from scratch for next year. What we should be focusing on is getting that consistency and providing the appropriate amount of in-person teaching, and we'll work with each school to come up with an appropriate refresh timescale for that recorded material and recorded asynchronous content. So we want to reuse a lot of the provision we've generated. As I mentioned, small group in-person teaching will be small group teaching will be in person in the more optimistic scenarios, with maximum group sizes determined by government guidelines. In the most optimistic scenarios, there'll be potential for larger group teaching, but again, number caps will be determined by rooms and government guidelines. Assessment for all programs will remain online by default, but there will be a provision to make requests for on-campus assessments, particularly where there are PSRB requirements or where there's a clear pedagogic rationale for on-campus assessments. And finally, we'd really like to encourage programs to focus on the assessment loads of students and staff to look at ensuring consistency, as I've already mentioned, but also reduce any excessive loadings on staff and students alike, and particularly checking that there's no bunching of deadlines, etc., wherever possible. So finally, I'd just like to mention the transition to the academic year 2021-22. This is on the minds of the sector quite heavily. Students coming into university and moving in, progressing to the next year of their course, have experienced a engagement with education that's been like no other group of students. A lot of it's been online, a lot of it's been socially isolated. Many students haven't sat on-campus traditional style exam for a very long time. So we're developing and we pulled together a transition oversight group to oversee and coordinate our education plans for 21-22. And this group will ensure that we've got clear transition plans in place for new and returning students, and that our operating principles are developed and adjusted as we move through the summer by the changing external environment generated by COVID-19. And right at the end, before I hand to Kerry, I'd just like to highlight the Head Start programme, which Kerry's going to talk about. I think this is a fantastic piece of work, which is looking at digital transition activities and resources for new students and targeted transition support plans for specific groups of students who are moving to a brand new educational setting. And I think it's really exciting. So I'll hand over to Kerry to talk about that right away.
Great, thank you, Graham, and good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I'm going to do a brief update on student recruitment and then cover off Head Start, which is the new initiative that Graham's just mentioned. So in terms of student recruitment, the UCAS decision deadline has been pushed back by about 5 weeks this year. So students have until the 10th of June to make their final decisions from 5 to 2, so their firm and their insurance choices. Currently, though, a lot of students are very focused on some sort of assessment that they're doing in their school or college. And obviously, the formal A-level exams are not being sat this year, as we know. So students are very much focused on what they're doing in school in terms of their local assessments. So alongside that, though, as we transition through the government roadmap and restrictions are eased as we go, this does provide us with an opportunity to introduce more activity on campus, particularly for offer holders. So what we're looking at doing is what we're calling offer holder plus events, which are very carefully managed in terms of numbers and also COVID compliant. So they provide an opportunity for offer holders and their parents or carers to visit the campus, to have a look at accommodation, and where appropriate and where possible to visit their schools. And I think this is really important because many students won't have actually visited the university before. So we know that research from the student room indicated that students who had yet to accept their offers were holding back because either they've got more questions they wanted to ask, or that they really wanted to visit the university. So it's really important that we do these, and we know that many of our competitors will be running these events as well. So I've just looked back to the UCAS application deadline for UK undergrad applicants in January. We were ahead of the sector and also our competitor set. But obviously acceptances are down because we're not comparing like for like in terms of the timings this year. So we've still got some work to do, and obviously we need to monitor acceptances really carefully as we move towards the June 10th deadline. In terms of international undergraduate numbers, these have slightly increased after being slightly down on last year. And so we're currently ahead of last year, which is fantastic news. Really important for us. We think this is probably aided because we are now taking direct applications for international undergraduates. Most of this growth is coming from India, although we are seeing some signs of growth from China. In terms of our postgraduate home numbers, this is looking really healthy in terms of an increase in applications and offers and acceptances. So some great work there. But obviously PGT International remains quite challenging compared to our pre-COVID position, as you would expect. So applications and offers are significantly down, but acceptances are really holding up and are well ahead of this time last year, and that includes with deposits paid. So as you'd expect, last year really, most of the growth is coming from India, but again, we're starting to see some green shoots of recovery coming from China, but it's going to take us some time, I think, before we recover to a pre-COVID position in terms of our student recruitment from China. Obviously, we've got mitigation plans in place for students to do online delivery for semester 1 for international students, particularly those students in red listed countries, and also quarantining plans are well underway. So just looking back to UK, so clearing has been brought forward this year, and we've got results day on a Tuesday for the first time, which is on Tuesday the 10th of August. So quite a change for us, getting our heads around that. But this is aimed to give students a little bit more time to appeal if they choose to, based on their teacher assessed grades. So planning is well underway now for confirmation and clearing, and we're expecting to have more staff than ever working on the clearing call centre this year, just because of the complexity and volume, of course, we're expecting. Last year was incredibly busy, particularly on confirmation, students who were holding offers who'd got queries. So we just want to make sure that we've got a really good number of staff supporting those students who are offer holders and are being confirmed or have got queries, as well as those students that are coming through clearing. If you are interested in working on clearing and on the phones, then please do get in touch. We provide training. It's really hard work, but it is actually a really rewarding experience. So I do encourage you, if you're interested in supporting that, then please get in touch. So just moving on to the new initiative, which is Head Start. So as colleagues have already said, students have been, most of the time this year, they've been studying at home. It's been a really tough year for them. So we've introduced a new project, which is very much focused on supporting students through those final phases of transition as they're thinking about coming to university, and absolutely supports our conversion for those students who are offer holders, particularly if they become a firm accept. So this is a university-wide project. It's been led by the Future Students Office in External Relations, but we've been absolutely thrilled by the engagement and support from colleagues across the institution on helping us shape this programme. So we've got 3 key phases to the programme. The first one is around sort of mood changing. So this is about building confidence for students, support with finances and studying at university, and actually thinking a little bit long term about their future careers. We then move on to mind changing, where we've got most of our sort of subject focus activity, but also mental health support, where we know a lot of students may be struggling because they've been working in isolation for so long, and actually giving them an opportunity to start to meet other students who may be applying to their course and holding an offer. So starting to build a bit of a friendship group. And then the final stage is the life-changing phase, which is very much around preparing them for university life, getting ready for start of term and really strengthening those friendships. So we've got a mixture of live and on-demand activity. Most of it's being created using market insight from teachers, from careers advisors and from students. So we know that what we're providing is what people are saying that they need. We're also, though, as part of this programme, supporting parents and carers. Now, we know over the last few years their influence has grown in supporting their son or daughter to progress to university life. And I think that's become even more important this year. And we've had nearly 700 parents or carers involved in some of the Head Start programme already. So it shows there's a real appetite for parents and carers to get involved and to support where they can. So that's just a brief update on student recruitment. As ever, you know, it's looking pretty good at the moment, but we can't be complacent and we have a long way to go. We know that with international student recruitment, any changes in terms of COVID could have a significant impact on our student recruitment from different markets. And we know just how busy and how competitive clearing is. So it is still very much a critical focus for the university moving forward. But I would like to take this opportunity just to thank everybody who works so hard on student recruitment, whether you're an admissions tutor, whether you support on an open day doing talks, our students, all of our colleagues, everybody, you know, this is a team effort and it makes a massive difference. I would like to thank everybody for your support, and we need to keep going. Right, so I'm now going to hand over to the questions. As always, we'll answer a variety of different questions in the session today, as many as we can in the time we've got allowed. If we don't have time to answer the question, don't worry, we always follow up and respond in writing. We'll share those on SharePoint, usually within about a week after the live event. So I'm going to ask the first question, I'm going to ask Jeff, which is around graduation. So will graduations be remote again this year?
We have, I'm afraid, had to take a decision not to hold in-person graduations as normal this summer due to the situation with COVID, but we will be holding digital graduation celebrations at the school level later in July, and then we will be inviting our students back to in-person graduations at some point next academic year, and we're just reviewing our options on that. The other thing we're looking at is providing some course-based end-of-year celebrations for our students. So we did a survey of our students to see what support and engagement opportunities they would welcome for the summer term, and they've said that they want to socialise and meet their friends. So we're going to provide an opportunity for end-of-year celebrations, which will include some drinks and some photo opportunities, hopefully outside the new Percy G extension, which is now open and serving food and drinks to students and to staff. And the other thing we've put on in this summer term is a fantastic Summertime 21 programme, and I'd like to thank George Kelly and the External Relations team for all of their fantastic work putting that programme together, and also the teams that are providing support to those activities. We've issued over 3,000 gym passes, we've had 400 students engaging in wellbeing and career support activities, and over 1,000 students engaging in Team Leicester and intramural competitive sport. So we've really worked hard to put a programme in place for our students. But of course, it's a shame they can't attend an in-person graduation, but we will absolutely give them that opportunity at some point next academic year. Thank you, Kerry.
Great, thank you very much, Jeff. So I'm going to hand over to Martin next. We've got a question around the proposed changes to IT services. So I think colleagues are asking for an update in terms of what the next steps might be, please.
Thanks, Kerry, and good afternoon, everybody. So just to say a little bit of background on phase 2. So phase 2 for the Shaping for Excellence changes We've said consistently all along, we expect to possibly include the IT team, the Red team and Learn Services. It doesn't include any changes to academic departments. It never has done, and we've got no intention of making any further changes in those areas. So first of all, to say it has taken us a little while to work out exactly what we want to do. I understand that that's unsettling for staff because there's been radio silence from us for a period of time. And I'm sure that you'll appreciate that we're trying to balance getting it done as quickly as we can with making sure that if we do choose to make any changes, that they've been really well thought out and that we're clear about what changes we want to make. We do expect for all of those areas in phase 2 that we'll be able to say over the next month or so what changes we expect to make, if any. And we are thinking very carefully about what we might want to do. We need to make sure each of those services delivers the right things for us in the future, but we also are mindful of that change is disruptive and we don't want to make change unnecessarily. So we're trying to balance that at the moment. Apologies, it is taking us a while. We are working on it. It's not that nothing is happening, and we do expect to come back to you very soon.
Thank you, Martin. So Heather Smith asked a question which is around PGR students. So most of the conversation so far is about teaching, which applies to undergraduate and masters. So whilst we understand this is important, could the conversation also be inclusive to PGR students? So I'll hand that over to Phil.
I'm inferring from your question that you share my view that our PGR community is absolutely critical to the university's academic mission. We've been seeking to communicate with our PGR students largely through the doctoral college, but not solely. But communication can always be improved, and I think your question is a really helpful reminder of that. As the new PVC R&E, I've only really had PGR students in my portfolio for a short time, but we're certainly going to be working with the doctoral college to ensure that there's appropriate attention and focus on this important part of our university community. And that's everything from how we recruit our PGR students, how we look after them when they're here, how we support and nurture, how we ensure that there are appropriate career opportunities discussed, etc. So just to reassure you, Heather, although I think PGR hasn't always had the attention it merits, we have brought it to executive board in the last month. We've also discussed it at the Research and Enterprise Committee. So really important question. We're on the case, but we can certainly do better, I think.
The question asked, we keep being told how good it is to be or see people back on campus. So how does this align to the removal of professional services staff under WorkSmart? So first of all, let me reassure you, we're not removing professional services staff as part of WorkSmart. WorkSmart is our name for agile working. So what we're trying to do there is have a really blended approach to working. So professional services divisions in phase 1 will work in an agile way, so they'll work sometimes on campus and sometimes at home, but that's dependent on the role that they have. And then phase 2 will be looking at professional services colleagues who work in schools and colleges. So we'd absolutely expect to see professional services colleagues on campus. What we said is that we want people to continue working as they have done until the 1st of August, and we've got and by then we'll have the agile working spaces ready for colleagues. So the first phase will start the 1st of August, and then we'll bring on more WorkSmart spaces as we move through the year. So we're really looking forward to seeing more professional services colleagues back on campus, and we're preparing for that. So I'm just going to move on to a question for Emma, which relates to paternity leave for parents. So just asking really, this is a really positive move in terms of shared paternity leave, and what can we do to promote this better for staff so that they can utilise this?
Thank you, Kerry, and good afternoon, everybody. So thank you very much for the feedback, and after the last Q&A we published some links and also further publicised the managers workshop which we were running, and we also promote paternity leave through our care and parent network. But taking on board the feedback, we will look at further promoting it again, and I think we can do that in one of two ways. We can do it across the university, and I can work with the comms team on that, but also locally through the HR teams as well. So thank you for the feedback.
Great, thank you, Emma. So I think today we sent an email out which related to updated information on action short of strike, and the question says it's not very clear, so can we please clarify that you intend to deduct pay continuously from when marking was available until the marks are returned, even if the workload model calculation for that marking suggests the marking only takes 5 days. So I've asked that question in full, so it's clear, and I'll hand that over to Edmund.
The communication that we received from UCU stated that action short of a strike would be continuous from the 4th of May. Now, we do think that it's really important to support our students as much as we can to enable our students to graduate and to progress. So let me be really clear on this. If, and this is what my letter to you said today, if the marks are returned in time and all exam processes, boards, etc. are completed so that our students can progress and graduate, then there will be no reductions. So the question talks about the marks being returned. If the marks are returned in time for our students to progress and graduate, there will be no deductions.
So a couple of questions for Martin. The first one is, will the new car park be ready for when we return to campus? And the second one relates to the fact that obviously Percy G is now finally reopened, which is fantastic. So when can we see more buildings reopening on campus?
So very simple answer to the first one. So the new car park will be open and ready for the autumn, when we're expecting colleagues to be back on campus in greater numbers. It is all finished. It's great. It's going to be a great facility for staff. But at the moment, because numbers on campus are quite low, we haven't opened it up more generally, but it will be available later on in the year. And as chair of COG, we've thought through with the team there and with other colleagues very carefully how we reopen buildings over the summer. It is great to see some buildings reopened. The Percy G has opened recently, and that's a really great facility, particularly for students. It's lovely to see them using the food court, their own activity area, and see them studying in that building. Over the summer, we're planning gradually to reopen the remaining buildings that will be with us long term. You know, there are a small number of buildings on North Campus that we are expecting to dispose of and to sell over the coming years. But for other buildings, we have a phased plan over the summer so that we'll reopen them, but we'll do that in an ordered way. For many buildings, they've been closed for a year, and therefore we need to make sure that they're properly cleaned, they're properly ready to be reopened, and we'll be doing that gradually over the summer so that as we move into August, the campus will feel open as it has done in the past.
Thank you, Martin. We have a question asking about clearing and will that take place on campus as normal this year? Obviously, that's dependent on the government roadmap, but if everything goes according to plan and the restrictions are further eased, then yes, that's the intention, that clearing will be on campus this year. I'm going back to Martin with a question around the lateral flow tests. So the question asks, are we expected to undertake them twice weekly in line with government guidance when we return to the office?
Yes, please, is the answer to that. So testing is not mandatory, but we're highly recommending it. And of course, it's part of keeping yourself safe, but keeping the wider community safe as well. As we stand today, there's a couple of options. So we've got a testing station here on campus, and we've got a couple of others around the wider estate as well. So you can come and be tested in that facility, or it's absolutely fine to do a test at home. What is going to be shortly in place is that if you're testing from home, you'll be able to report and link that result to us and the university, and we won't know who it is, but we'll get some data on testing on the results of testing. I'm really pleased to also be able to tell you that we've just been awarded a contract by the Department of Health and Social Care. We've had some colleagues that have worked really hard on getting this contract in place, and we've had long discussions with them. So as we move into the autumn, we will be offering COVID screening testing, which would be a spit in a pot saliva test. So it'll be much less intrusive than sticking a swab up your nose and to the back of your throat. And we will then have a facility on our own campus that will be testing those samples to see if there's any COVID and alerting you of the results in the normal way. So we are going to be trailblazing this and testing it. It might be rolled out more broadly in the country, but it should be a nice way of all of us doing something that's quite simple just to keep everybody safe as we move into the autumn.
Thank you, Martin. So we have a more of a comment really. It says, in a recent all staff update, it was acknowledged that UCU had posted a racially aggressive post on social media and had taken it down. When will UCU publicly acknowledge that their approach to shaping for excellence has been abhorrent, toxic and divisive? They should be ashamed. So it's not really a question, but I'm going to ask you if you'd like to comment on that, Edmund.
Thanks, Kerry. That is a question for UCU, and I know that UCU colleagues will be in this event, and I trust that they will be able to read that question and answer it themselves. What I would like to say is that we have a very clear dignity and respect policy, and when we receive complaints, then our processes and procedures are used to address those complaints in the correct manner. That has always been the case. That is the case now. When we receive complaints, we deal with them appropriately by using our procedures and by adhering to our dignity and respect policy. Thanks.
Thank you, Edmund. A question for Emma. So many universities in the sector have a day to complete all mandatory training. Would this be explored here to increase training completion?
So ROD and IT teams are working on the PDD process at the moment, because what we want to do is bring the PDD process online from the summer. And as part of this, we're going to be looking at mandatory training and how we can make this easier for staff to complete. So thank you very much for that idea. I think it's a really good one, and it's something we can have a look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. So we're coming up to the end of the session now. So as I said, any questions that we haven't had time to answer, we will do and publish on SharePoint. There's a couple of questions I've kept till the end to hand over to Nishan before he sums up. So the first one is, what measures will be used to judge the success of the new strategic plan? And the second one is, how does the Exec Board plan to restore trust in the university in light of the use of a staff protection support policy being used in a threat of punitive action against someone from our university community?
Thanks, Kerry, and thanks to colleagues for answering questions, and thank you for raising the questions. And as before, Kerry said, we will respond to all the questions if they have not been addressed. So I think the first question I want to take is about the strategic plan and how we measure success. And as the questioner rightly pointed out, they know that I'm not a fan of league tables because they go up and down and they are not very rigorous in many respects. But nevertheless, they are useful guides. So I think we shouldn't set very hard targets, but we should know which aspects of the league table metrics we want to focus on. So, for example, we can measure how good our research is. That can be measured in terms of the discipline. It will vary for different discipline to discipline. If you are in social sciences and humanities, it is more about how well your research is regarded by the international community for the kind of scholarship that you produce. Not the citation metrics are not necessarily relevant for some of those disciplines. So we have to use other metrics like fellowships and prizes. Whereas if you're in a science-based discipline or life sciences, the fellowships are important, and Guy Rudd, for example, became a fellow of the Academy of Medical Sciences last week. Or you would look at the grant funding and the citation, which is appropriate for that discipline. So what we need to do is to look at the metrics that are sensible for our activity, depending on what activity we want to calibrate. So that is one way of measuring how good our research is. Similarly, on education, we will look at the type of students we are able to attract to Leicester, the diverse backgrounds they come from, and the outcomes that we produce, and obviously over time the kind of successful careers they lead to go on to. So I think we need to be mindful that we as a university have different ways of measuring how successful we are, and that should not be based on one or two metrics which go up and down. And that's why I don't base our strategy on metrics. What I think is, and I've always been clear throughout my management career, we focus on what is good about university and the metrics take care of themselves. It should not be the other way around. So we develop our strategy, we know what is good for our university, and then the metrics will hopefully reflect that. And they will do, and I've talked to people who put league tables together, they vary the weighting on different parts of the metric to produce a different metric. And we can't respond to that kind of changes as a university. We need to have a longer term plan. And the other thing that we can measure how good is nationally and internationally, how well we are regarded. As you know, the boycott Leicester is not helping at the moment, but I'm absolutely confident. I'm absolutely confident we will produce high quality research and education in this university, because I met staff in this university. We have fantastic staff, but we can't carry on doing everything. We have to focus on areas that we really want to excel and continue to be world leading in the research and teaching. That means taking some difficult choices. And so with the May, we will measure our success in the quality of the research that we produce and the education, and how well we are regarded in terms of attracting staff and students into this university. And that is the measure that I have always held on to in my career as a metric of success. And the other question that was asked is about morale. And without a doubt, this has been a difficult time for everybody involved, whether you're impacted or not. But these are difficult times and we have to make some difficult choices. And as I mentioned before, I met you in my visits, talked to many of you in various events, and it is clear to me that university cannot carry on the way we are, and we have to find ways of supporting the research and teaching. And that meant taking some difficult choices. And I will come back to staff and talk to you again to see whether we are making the right choices, whether we are there are more choices to be made in terms of how we use the resources. Let me be categoric. There are no changes planned for any other academic department as part of any of the change programs. If I was, I would have told you. We're not. The phase 2 is what we have said all along, is the remaining professional services. We delayed them because the people who were leading them took on their post quite recently. So we need to give them time to settle down and understand the divisions better before they can propose the changes. That's why those areas were delayed slightly compared to the other areas. There are no other plans. If there are plans, I will tell my Senate, I will tell my senior leadership team, I will tell my council, and you will know about it. So in terms of trust and morale, absolutely, it is up to me to build that, and I will do the best I can. And I have done that before, and I've been very transparent with you. I will follow a governance process, but I will tell you why I'm making some choices. And I've always said that not everybody will agree with me on everything I will do, but I will take my governance board with me. I will take the senior leadership team with me. I will take the Senate with me. That's all I can do. And these are the people entrusted with the university to make some difficult choices and make the right choices for the institution. And that's why we are in leadership. And we will do the best we can. And you will judge me whether I'm successful or not, whether I managed to build the morale up or not. And it's not just down to me. Every member of the exec board needs to do their part. Every head of school, every professional service lead needs to do their part. Because ultimately, your colleagues want to hear from you, your line manager, whether things are going well, or if things are not going well, what more we need to do as a university. And I will listen to you. Where we have things to improve, we will focus on them. Where we are doing good things, we will celebrate. And one of the reasons I was very clear from the outset, this change program will be managed within this academic cycle. And we will complete everything by August, except for some of the areas in the professional services which were delayed, as I said, due to people taking on the post later. We will not be doing any other program of change. Next academic cycle, and that's why you heard from Graham and Kerry how we are preparing for the next academic cycle. I'm not proposing to make any changes in the next academic cycle or after. But it's down to all of us to do the best we can in terms of the research we do, to the best education we can do, and attract the students to this university so everybody can be employed in this university. The government is not going to give us any handouts. I will do everything I can working with you and the senior team to put the right strategy in place for income generation. So we don't have to always look for cost saving. But clearly, if you look on the news everywhere, you will see the higher education sector is facing the tough choices. We are not alone. But we have tried to keep the changes to the minimum. And I will do everything I can with you and the rest of the senior team to take this university forward, because I absolutely believe this is a great university. But that doesn't mean we have to carry on without any changes. And once we put the changes in place, we will work together to build this university to the great university that the founders wanted it to be. And I will do everything I can to make that possible. I hope you have a good afternoon.